And we're live. Oh, get it, Philip, get it. Yeah.
There we go. Did you hear it? Did you get it?
We got it. We got it. And
there you go.
Okay, I'll do that off screen. That's embarrassing.
Let's go. Let's get it in.
There you go. There you go, Philip. That is perfection.
Wow.
Nice.
But it's only ginger ale. Does that count?
It counts. It counts.
Okay.
You know,
I don't drink beer. I'm sorry. I don't drink beer.
That's okay. But you know what? Chris and I are still talking about the time you mentioned pickle beer.
Pickle beer. Right? There's a co-worker of mine that ordered it. I'm gonna have to send her a message because she's working from home. I'm hey, just bring it into the office. I need to mail it to Connecticut.
To mail it to Chris and Katie to, let them try this. That is so great, Philip. That is so great. Well, we had a pretty sunny, lovely weekend. A few clouds here and there, but mostly it was really, really nice up here. And Philip, you had a fabulous day yesterday, and you got to see your beloved Mets.
I went to see my beloved Mets play baseball. It was a doubleheader. It was social distancing in the stadium, so it was cool. I enjoyed it because my buddy and we went. There was someone in row 14. We were in row 17, and there was nobody else behind us until row 31.
Oh my God! Wow. That is so great. And they played in your town over in Colorado Springs, right?
Well, they play in Denver. It's a little bit up the street, but it's okay.
Nice. That is just fabulous.
Do you mind if I mix the ginger ale with something?
Yes, I do it. Do it, Phil. Tell us, what is that? What is that you got there?
This is Stone ginger wine.
Ooh.
Green ginger wine. Beautiful. I'm an advocate of ginger.
I love that. Ginger's very healthy. It's got a spice to it. It's a nice flavor. Yes. People in the chat, do we like ginger ale, ginger wine? Ginger wine. How is that made? What is this?
This one is actually directly from Jamaica. One of my buddies came back from JA. Cool. That's my family background. And, nice. And it's funny, this little small bottle, I'm not turning this properly. There you go. This small bottle is the alcohol is higher than what they sell here in the USA.
Ooh.
So I'm not mad at you.
Oh, you better be careful, fella.
I know. I gotta make it to the show.
Cheers.
Cheers. Here we go.
Very good. Very good. All right. So we are so excited. We have a great night of readings as usual. We'll do our official welcome in a moment, but we have a great night of readings planned with Pete Duval and Anton Yakovlev, and Chris is away in California.
I planned it like this. I'm like, y'all get Chris on a weekend so I can jump in.
As soon as he's out of there. But actually, that we are so excited to have you, Philip. You're one of our dearest friends and friend of the, of our stream and our reading series. And so it's a total pleasure to have you fill in and yes. So it's a special night for many reasons. Chris is out, out there in California about to film his cameo in the movie version of Shriver. Very exciting. And we've got Pete Duval, Anton Yakovlev, and we've got Philip J. Curtis as a guest co-host. It's a great night. Yes, and we have good friends already here watching with us in the chat. Mom and Dad, of course.
But I beat them tonight. Right?
Yes, you were here before everybody. we have Joanna Myers. Hey, we have Susan M. Davis out there.
That's my girl too. I like Susan.
Susan. Yes. We're gonna have to have another steamy reading night, and maybe see who gets steamier.
I'm giving it to Susan, man. She's
Give it
gonna kill it. I'll show up. I'll show up. But.
Susan gets that award. That's great. That's so great. Sarah Sleeper is with us again.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
I've met so many good people off of this platform. It's great.
Aren't they just wonderful writers and lovely people? It's a blessing. It's just fabulous. Well,
season positives.
Say again?
I said COVID season positives.
Yes, absolutely. This is like the silver lining for me, having created this and have spent so much wonderful time with you all, and to have gotten to meet you, Philip. Lona's in the chat. She's here.
Lona. Oh, there you go. That's Lona.
Fabulous. Oh, very good. Well, it's 8:00. It's time for us to give our official welcome to to FUMFA 49. Our readers tonight are Pete Duval, former FUMFA faculty, mentor, friend to many of us, and special guest poet Anton Yakovlev. We're so excited to hear both of their readings, and also really excited to get to hang out with them and ask a whole bunch of questions at 9:00. Yeah. So let me just share with you a special message from Chris, because you may be wondering, audience, where is Chris Belden? Of course, we're extremely excited. We have Philip J. Curtis as our special guest.
I got the bald head. I got the bald head for Chris. I grabbed
the bald head to the party. Yeah. Oh my God, Chris is with us. Oh my God.
Uh-oh. Chris. You want to get rid of me?
Hey. I just walked in the door. I'm in sunny California. Look.
Man. Don't make us jealous, Chris.
How about that, huh?
Pretty awesome. Well, Chris, we are doing fabulous, Chris, and we're so excited to see you. When are you filming your cameo for the movie version of Shriver?
Well, I'm going to be on the set tomorrow, but I think we're shooting my cameo on Tuesday.
Oh my God. That is super exciting. Chris, do you have anything to share with the audience? All of our fans are here. Susan M. Davis, Joanna Myers, Mom and Dad.
I'm just going to say hello. I do have to run, but I'm going to watch this episode later. So
yes.
Everybody be good. I will tell you that I just met Michael Shannon in the lobby of the hotel, and had a kind of a interesting, strange little chat with him. But
nice.
There you go.
Fabulous.
That's my movie star story of the day.
Your movie star story of the day. Well, I cannot wait to hear the remainder of all of the stories that will happen over the next several days. We can't wait to hear it next week when you're back.
That's right.
Fabulous.
So Chris is like his own Stan Lee, making a cameo in his own movie. I like it.
Right. You're exactly right, Philip.
That's perfect.
So, anyway, break a leg, Phil. Can you hear me? Break a leg.
Yes,
Phil.
I'm decoration. I'm not breaking a leg. I'm just here for decoration purposes.
You guys say hi to my friend Pete Duval, and
definitely.
And maybe I might check in later and ask a question or something. I'll put it.
Well, you'll have to pop in and do exactly that, Chris. Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
I'll
Thanks,
talk to you guys later.
All right. We'll talk to you later. See you, Chris.
Later.
Have fun.
We
Oh,
will.
definitely.
All right. Well, that was so great. He was able to pop in. That's perfect.
That's
Um,
cool. That's cool.
yeah. Okay, so we have a fun little song from him, but you know what? I'm going to save that for later because we need to get into our first reading. Philip, would you do the honors and introduce Anton Yakovlev with his bio, please?
I'm doing the honors. I'm glad we got his name out. I hope I don't mess it up now, 'cause I've been practicing. All right. Anton Yakovlev poems have appeared in the New Yorker, the New Critic, the Hopkins Review, Measure, the Stockholm Review of Literature, and elsewhere. His work has been profiled in the Huffington Post, the Arts Fuse, and at the Art Inkwell, among others. His translations from Russian are expected, has appeared in Exchanges, National Translation Month, Circumference, Lunch Ticket, Yes Poetry, and On the Seawell. He is the author of 4 poetry chapbooks, released in 2018. Was James Tate Poetry Prize, Ordinary Impalas, The Ghost of Grant Wood, from the Finishing Line Press in 2015, and Neptune Court, the Operating System in 2015. Oh man, Anton, you're killing me, man.
Incredible, right?
A book of translations of selected poems by, this is a tough name, Sergei Yeshinin. Nailed
You
it.
got it? He'll say it later.
It came out in 2019 from Sensitive Skin Books. Anton is born in Moscow, Russia, and is a graduate of Harvard University and has also written and directed several short films. He is a co-host of the Carmine Street Metrics reading series in Manhattan and the Rutherford Red Wheelbarrow series in Rutherford, New Jersey, and a former education director at Bowery Poetry Club. Put your hands together. We can't see it, but put your hands together for Anton.
Thank you so much, Philip. And Anton, we'll leave it to you. Such incredible credits. We can't wait to hear you read.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for having me. Really glad to be reading with you, and it's an honor to be invited. So I am going to start with the poem called Prelude. Properly labeled pill bottles sit in his console. He juggles 3 or 4 pills, catches them with his mouth, gulps soda, burps. Aspens by the road are blindingly windless. He taps the gas pedal gently, tests the brakes, the mirrors. A half-transparent woman waves at him from the sidewalk. Contrails cross each other like denial. Thieves swarm every intersection. The attack dog behind the electric fence has no teeth, but will suck you to death. GoFundMe transferred a few $100s. Brutalist mansions feed his eroticism. A near-topless arsonist joins him, briefly, riding shotgun with her favorite Yankee candle. He remains realistic, knows he may not survive, delivers a few cabbages to the homeless. Lush sands of a sea-like lake give respite. Just a few more demons to go. He knows he can make it if he doesn't intentionally crash. He's come to terms with his own resemblance to a cockroach, and that keeps him from acting out. Rabid rats hop into the car, nibble his feet methodically. Turkey vultures form a flying skull. The dead by the road love company, and next time he drives into sunrise, he will still shiver, but less. He speed dials the person he used to love, then tries for a long time to remember her face. Low-hanging fruit falls through his moonroof. Yes, he thinks. He will get through this. He can see it now. He can see it. He apes the final moments of the Cheshire Cat. Just give him a few more years. He'll get comfortable with the world's persistent murder. He'll stand at the podium, and quietly predict a war. And the applause will grow louder. This next poem, which is kind of a sequel to the first, takes its title from the second to last line in Rilke's Archaic Torso of Apollo. The last couple of lines go, "For here there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life." This poem is called "For Here There Is No Place." You've figured out the colonization of Mars and the need to live in caves for 500 years. You've predicted private nuclear weapons, deciphered symbols of bigotry on some trump cards. You've held cookouts with revolutionaries on the wrong end of a burning national park. But when they Skype you up, flashing their press credentials, all they want to know about is your 7-year relationship. You've built roller coasters under the boots of soldiers. You've fed dumbstruck children tales of exploding blimps, only finding rest for an hour or two in the triangular living room of an angry oat farmer. You've noticed it usually rains on the evenings you give public speeches. But when they ask about the source of your depression, they fail to notice all the dead trees in the forest and the garbage patches around the oceans. They just want to know your ex's rating on the attractiveness scale. When you scoff at them, they liken you to a deer stupidly dashing away from a Lego car. They photograph your belly from below. They wait till you open your mouth at a crooked angle, then invite an award-winning sketch artist to meld your face onto the body of a beached whale. You get into indie films, but they put a pomelo in your mouth and laugh at your eyebrows. They pay for an ad on the side of a passing train, condemning your manifesto on acid rain. When you tell them to fuck off, they revoke your voice. At a cafe, you're 170 pages into the second draft of your hardball reboot of personal responsibility when a honcho with an insecure grin streams your ugly forehead to the world. When you can't help but talk for several hours to a disgraced firebrand with a stunning face, a ripped lilac dress, and 17 Twitter followers, the honcho writes an editorial arguing that you're one of the world's bigger problems. And so you dream of walking into the sea, just melting into the waves. You want to no longer care about the people who disown family members for simply knowing your name. You come back to the national park to see if the revolutionaries are okay. You become the firebrand's 18th follower and can't stop tweeting at her until she agrees to meet you for macchiato. You iron your best flannel shirt. But the firebrand has Googled you and won't act normal until you tell her all about your depression. Sure, she'll discuss her documentary lit entirely by rockets, but she always circles back to that 7-year relationship that landed you in the hospital with a knife sticking out of your forehead. And you'd resist her, but there's something about her eyes. And so you tell her of your ex's blush and curls, and the cabbage kitchen you ran together, and the charity she had made you a mascot of, and your favorite goldfinches and philosophers, and your symbolism for two, and your foggy mountain, and your fights, and the hours you passed in your car getting up the nerve just to see her again, and your badminton of humiliation, and your guilt the night you stopped feeling anything, and her face on the day she told you objectively deserved to die. The firebrand's blue hat rests on the coffee table and smiles at you like a misplaced archaic torso of Apollo. Nothing moves, not even the door frame. And the firebrand shrugs and must go. And you waddle down your childhood avenue in the general direction of your favorite stump in the forest, the one on which you sat for hours one day, talking to your ex about zombies. The Cedar Creek. We steep tea, and then we read about tea, and then we steep it some more, and we read some more, and there's just so much we need to say to each other. The moment you tell me the truth, I fall in the Cedar Creek. It's not my fault, nor is it yours, but now our neighborhood is not the same. We do not taste chocolate the same way. Can I forgive you? No, not really. Not at all. Go fall into a volcano. I'll be the volcano. I'll pick you up after the show trial. I would have liked to linger on your face. I used to wait for you by the Cedar Creek. After all, plenty of scholars keep their careers alive with thoughts of you. You juggle torches, even when people kiss you. I would have liked to nestle with your world, but a world can destroy a rowboat. A lifelong addict, you are now clean, and a spy, but you ripple like a head scratcher. The Cedar Creek keeps adjusting its watershed. You no longer balk at decomposition. You compose a symphony to be played with metal hooks on dead things. You stand in front of the Cedar Creek and don't reveal any secrets. You resort to Russian anti-Napoleonic strategies, which is to say, you bravely choose to let Moscow burn. A general is wise to let the other general self-destruct. I do. The leitmotifs come back. We argue and we clutch. We go to Jesus Christ and bite into the infinite bread. Will we ever move beyond our lack of cue balls? The Cedar Creek never did turn into wine. Your fear touches me like a bouncing night. Coffins of the living. You see them everywhere once you've trained your eye. In the photos of birch buds interrupted by bird heart attacks, in the Salvation Army's Medusa gaze, in the executioner's staycations, in the overheating grandfather pendulums. You stopped your grandfather clock so it wouldn't disturb me. I stayed awake all night, waiting for its next ring. By morning, you were wearing a scarf of sleeping flies. Avenue of the Americas gets me every time. Here I am, walking with my peanut butter milkshake, late rain dripping off all those statues with misspelled names. And here they come, the coffins, twisted like researchers, sudden like urban redwoods. Toward the end, your house had almost no furniture. A bit like you, beautifully Victorian, but nothing really there anymore. When you gave me a hug, your door pounded the back of my head. In my dream, I saw beautiful coffins. They were coughing, sneezing, spewing random insults and pink mist through their unfinished hinges. Some would have pictured them as priests. Others would have hidden in them. You started to walk on the wrong side of the trampoline. You started your sentences at their deaths. Every time I checked in on you, you looked like you had mutated into a jazz song. At times, they opened bridges in Amsterdam. April began with a couple of startlingly disarming guitar chords before becoming a coffin itself. My brain was mostly on the outside of my skull by then. You lived through anonymous yard sale ticks, immigrant political detachments, and shotgun goodwill. You pointed the muzzle of your omnipotence at all the wrong tuxedos. I turned my head the wrong way. I was afraid of still seeing you as the sun. The most honest of us sleep in our coffins. I still look at that photo you took of me, wearing film strips under the heat lamp. This next poem is called On Facebook. On Facebook, cats have been de-emphasized. We only see them from our closest friends. You think they swarm you, but you'd be surprised. On Facebook, cats have been de-emphasized. The bots climb trends. Cambridge has analyzed our timelines dry. Here come the flaming hands. Where are the cats? They've been de-emphasized. Oh, let me see them. Let them be my friends. Staying on the topic of Facebook, this next poem is called Tender Buttons in Manhattan and is actually a found poem compiled entirely from Facebook comments under the video how the button changed fashion by small thing, big idea. Tender buttons in Manhattan. I wonder what else in our world is simply waiting for its buttonhole. My Who Needs a Bra 14th century dress. I love buttons. I love buttons. Rickrack and buttons. Buttons are a nightmare to a 4-year-old. The struggle is intense. I knew a man who hated buttons. Buttons on the floor. Pick them up. I remember going to button stores, quelling over each other's buttons. Some are sacred. Button tin or button jar? Oh, how I love buttons. I designed buttons and sold high-end buttons. Look up your local button club, State Button Society, or the National Button Society. So my buttons, gotta send some to you. I love buttons, but they're only good if your fingers can work. How many times have you found the perfect button? I advise you to visit the Museum of Button in Sant'Arcangelo della Romagna. I can finally admit to having a button collection. I love buttons. I love buttons too. I always remove the buttons before throwing the garment away. I have boxes full of all kinds of buttons. Round buttons are my favorite also. I have a jean jacket that I decorated with buttons. Let someone pick out the button. I mean that. Hey, button lovers. Would love your feedback on buttons. Changing the face of buttons, literally. And button, who's got button? I love buttons. Tender buttons in Manhattan. I need to find buttons before winter. They are here for the long run. I love buttons. No bad button. Buttons, yep, would like to meet more buttons all over the world. I love buttons. I need to shop for buttons, okay? The button queen, I have boxes of buttons. The button inspiration started a button jar. Me too on the button topic because of all your buttons on your new dress. Someone stole my jar of buttons. Buttons. Да, тема неисчерпаемая. Anxiety. And all the cashiers in the chocolate store loved them. No occasion to dream of poison. So much was said through eye contact, even when there was none. Their little corner welcomed blossoms while they sat speed reading. No restraining orders. Not that much death. The endorphins of a harmless question holding on to the face across the water. A walking tour of an office park, a marina, a labyrinth, a novella, everything rhymed. His family, an indispensable cairn, pines on the seashore, silence at the movies. Memory. It got colder. The cashiers smiled. She sat for hours in the graveyard. He liked holiday lights and peeking into embassies on Sunday. They soaked their feet in puddles. Eyes closed, she painted. And when they imagined spies all around, they touched. No matter the play they went to, it was the way their knees pressed against each other. One day she got a tattoo, but the waves washed it off. One moment, no whales were visible. The next moment, no whales were visible. Not that much death. They attended colonization parties together. Hot air balloons touched waterfalls. Satellites flew too high to see or to hear. I held her like a pencil drawing. That was my first mistake. Whoever expected us to become the best movie of the decade needs to go home and become a better person. The rain stayed right where it fell. Even shadows failed better than me. Perhaps I could have still become her John the Baptist. She wouldn't have had to be Salome. Funny how a hand gesture can make one's year. 1 second, she's a statue in a crypt. The next second, she's a full moon. Tides of skyscrapers obeyed her. Birds learned her songs. Dogs bit each other at not having her in their lives. I could have jumped on the riptide, but a park ranger stopped me. I think about her lost photo albums. What iceberg has now absorbed them in the Arctic Ocean? Who doesn't know the feeling? You dive, and there it is, nibbled by belugas. And then you take up residence in a neighboring Coast Guard station and drink. Who wouldn't? For 6 months, you stare at a sketch on an aborted pipeline. Eventually, it gets easier. You go back to your ancestral secondary city. A skeleton of a boy you knew rules the landscape. This next poem was written exactly 1 year ago on April 18 of 2020, and I kind of wish that it felt less relevant, but it unfortunately still kind of does. Shelter. Went to the meditation, but only the snowed-in cardinals heard me. Far from any port, we're weighted by anchors made of phantoms. A few minutes of blossoms looking so very delightful until the tremors return. And notice how the dolphins of Venice now hover like psychic blimps. Multiple personalities shake off the idealism. You can't always get what the continental drift carries toward you. The ex-Navy put on his festive flannel shirt on the happiest day of his new normal, but no one showed out to greet him. They were all hiding in their fur closets, talking to ghosts of minks. The doves pecked on tasteless ice cream. Monuments to Saint Butcher in every city square. I can always play 20 questions with you. Make it 96 questions. Until the phone goes silent. God no, the default auto response. How laughable the lion-headed goats of our pasts. The sunlight paints your brushes with orange and yellow and an alive martini. Or did you look at the distant bridge across the majestic bay and find yourself having wishes you couldn't put anywhere? They usually go away by themselves. Don't worry too much. Just give it 30 or 40 years. Just like the monuments. But still we imagine a back room in our inner luxury hotels, where the prisoner called integrity has been safe and sound all this time, kept alive by the unprincipled genocidal brutes out of gratitude for some act of courage he pulled even before amoeba had evolved. Precisely like that. Welcome to your checkmate, mate. Welcome to your legacy. Well, the earth will swallow these ideas whole with some crunchy lava. And out beyond, nothing much will change for the worse. Even the empty parks are still pleasant to think about, blossoming with the sound of past year's tennis balls. Could we have imagined? Of course we could. Last week. There used to be a rocking chair upstairs. I'd listen to the news. The news was stark. Wildlife repopulating city squares. Containment efforts always off the mark. Vending machines have long run out of prayers. Torn passports waft through the uprooted bark. There used to be a rocking chair upstairs. Last week, even the poltergeists went dark. And I'm going to close with a translation of the poem, of one of the poems by Sergei Yesenin that I translated in the book, The Last Poet of the Village, came out a year and a half ago, which is a selected poem by Sergei Yesenin in my translation. So I'm going to read the original Russian poem first and then my translation. Мы теперь уходим понемногу в ту страну, где тишь и благодать. Может быть, и скоро мне в дорогу бренные пожитки собирать. Милые березовые чащи, ты земля, и вы равнин пески. Перед этим сонмом уходящих я не в силах скрыть моей тоски. Слишком я любил на этом свете все, что душу облекает в плоть. Мир осинам, что, раскинув ветви, загляделись в розовую водь. Много дум я в тишине подумал, много песен про себя сложил, и на этой на земле угрюмой счастлив тем, что я дышал и жил. Счастлив тем, что целовал я женщин, мял цветы, валялся на траве, и зверье, как братьев наших меньших, никогда не бил по голове. Знаю я, то не цветут там чаще, не звенит лебяжий шеей рожь. Оттого пред сонмом уходящих я всегда испытываю дрожь. Знаю я, что в той стране не будет этих нив, латящихся во мгле. Оттого и дороги мне люди, что живут со мною на земле. Even now, little by little, we are departing for that land of silence and grace. Pretty soon I too may have to pack my measly belongings. My dear birch thickets, earth, and you sands of plains, faced with the throng of departing, I cannot hide my anguish. I care too much for everything that clothes the soul in flesh. Peace be with aspens that have forgotten themselves, staring into pink waters with open branches. I've thought many thoughts in silence. I've composed many songs of myself. And on this grim earth, I'm happy to have breathed and lived. I'm happy to have kissed women, crushed flowers, rolled in the grass, and never hit beasts on the head, since they're our lesser brothers. I know woods don't bloom over there. Swans' necks don't ring out in the wheat. That's why I always tremble when I face the hordes of the departing. I know that other land won't have these cornfields cold in the dark. That's why I love the people who live on this earth with me. Sergei Yesenin. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Anton, what an absolutely incredible reading. We just want to give you applause that you can hear.
Oh, man. I can't wait for the Q&A because I got at least 2 questions.
Yeah, same here. And I'm sure that our audience has plenty as well. Anton, you're going to have to go on Facebook and YouTube later and just read all of the love that people were sharing with you. Just such incredibly powerful, poignant, gorgeous poems. And so awesome to finish with one of your translations. Getting to hear it in the original language and getting to hear your translation was just incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And now we are going to bring up our second reader of the night, Pete Duval. Welcome, Pete. Oh, I should have put a drum roll.
Drum roll. I'm not Chris. Drum roll.
Yes. Oh, Pete, we're so excited to have you with us tonight. You were one of our first readers in the very beginning.
I remember that. Yeah.
We're so glad to have you back. You're a dear friend of ours. And in terms of the FUMFA program, you were a mentor, you were a teacher to many of us. And I remember you from undergrad.
Right.
You know, we go way back. So we're so excited about your brand new collection, your brand new book, I should say, and excited to, will we be hearing from it tonight?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, fabulous. All right. Well, without further ado, I'm going to read your bio to introduce you. All right. Pete Duval is a fiction writer and photographer. His short story collection, Rear View, won the Breadloaf Writers Conference Bakeless Prize, the Connecticut Book Award, and was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Art Seidenbaum Award for First Fiction. A second collection, The Deposition, winner of the 2020 Juniper Prize for Fiction, was published by the University of Massachusetts Press this spring. Other awards include Grain Magazine's Short Grain Fiction Prize and Florida State University's World's Best Short Story Prize. Pete has received fellowships from the Breadloaf Writers Conference and the Collegeville Center for Ecumenical Research, and is the recipient of 2 Connecticut Artist Grants. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in Ascent, the Massachusetts Review, Alaska Quarterly Review, Witness, Chelsea, Exquisite Corpse, and Appalachian Heritage, among other venues. As a street and land landscape photographer, Pete explores the NYC metropolitan area, in particular Jersey City, where he lives, and coastal Massachusetts, where he grew up, settings that figure significantly in his writing as well. Woo! Another incredible life of publications and credits and awards. Just absolutely amazing, Pete.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So we're so excited to hear your reading. We will leave you to it.
Okay. Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be reading tonight, and I just want to say Anton's poetry is just delightful. I'm honored to be reading with him. I'm going to read a short story called Common Area. I think it's about 7 pages long, so it should take about 15 minutes to read. It has an epigraph from Robert Stone's A Flag for Sunrise that goes, he felt as though he were choosing one dream from among many. There were birds in all of them. The air traffic controller had always admired St. Francis of Assisi's uncomplicated rapport with small birds and animals. On the walk back from the bar, he decided to visit the parrots. These self-possessed birds held their tongues by night and woke at dawn to startle guests of the bed and breakfast with gobbled approximations of unremarkable daily sounds. Now, in the parlor upstairs, he lifted the cover from one of the hulking cages. It was an Afghan with radial powder blue piping that he suspected the owner herself had knitted. He liked the owner. She wore clothes intended for a much younger woman. He admired that. She served breakfasts of tarts and a variety of overly sweet things, then followed these up with dessert. She looked fit in jeans. The parrot beneath raised its head groggily. This would be Rita. The owner had told him the night before that her son was the only other person alive who could touch this bird. For years, they'd had a special relationship, her son and Rita. The air traffic controller had flashed to images of St. Francis of Assisi, thin-faced, one bony hand extended to the sparrows, stigma clearly visible. Cage cover in hand, he became aware of his own swaying, churned by the waves of what was possible. Lodging at the bed and breakfast was his wife's idea. He left that kind of thinking to her. It beat Hampton Inn, but he resented the forced conversation with other guests in the morning, and he avoided the common area. The walls were thin. The first night, lying in the narrow bed next to his wife, he'd worried about the owner's son. He'd heard the floorboards outside the room snap, then fall silent, and imagined he could feel the feathery edge of the man's zone of influence through the wall. This made him nervous about performing the connubial intimacies incumbent upon all married men. The owner's son drank, that was clear. He'd emerged from half-darkened rooms wearing a soiled t-shirt. Perhaps this was a man of inconsistent moral convictions. The air traffic controller lifted the latch to open the cage and slid the sleeve of his jacket up past his elbow. According to the owner, parrots like these routinely lived beyond 100 years. Rita was the younger bird with a long life ahead of her. The air traffic controller was already 51. He ate 30-minute steel-cut oatmeal in the morning and exercised aerobically. He had that kind of patience. Into the cage went his fist, slowly. He was trespassing. Well within his zone of concern now, Rita fidgeted. They demonstrated wisdom, these birds. People wrote them into their wills. During the day, Rita imitated a landline telephone and the end of recess bell from the grammar school next door. She issued what sounded like spoken English words. The air traffic controller knew better. What made a word wasn't only the sound. The night before, the owner had warned him not to insert his finger into the cage. Rita's beak appeared to be made of calcium, formed from a process of accretion like the curve of a nautilus shell. Last night, the air traffic controller had stood in this same spot, herb and fuzzy, and all at once, he'd realized the owner didn't trust him. Her words, her glances, her whole manner seemed to call into existence a world of recrimination to swallow him whole. She was a tiny woman with a handsome face and clear eyes, sassy eyes. With them, she'd seen something in the air traffic controller, some flaw in his soul that might lead to cruelty. But the air traffic controller wasn't cruel. He was competent. He kept thousands of people airborne and alive. Rita understood. They had their own connection. The air traffic controller commuted 45 minutes each way to work, rode the elevator to the 11th floor of a building with small windows in suburban Tampa, not far from a decommissioned section of the Air Force Base. Between shifts, he read widely. Science, meteorology, military history. He observed language courses on various digital media. Noons, he lunched at Subway with men his age who piloted remote-operated drones into enemy airspace on the other side of the planet. He'd played squash with one of them, only to decide against allowing the friendship to blossom after imagining the man's interior life. The air traffic controller's own zone of operation, the airspace he officially presided over, started small at ground level. There, it stretched just 50 miles across, but ascended in expanding radii to form an inverted wedding cake. He used this analogy at breakfast across from other husbands whom he secretly pitied for their positions as postal clerks or sales associates or small business owners, and his wife rolled her eyes. "Rita," he said, "what's the word on the street?" In slow motion, the bird shifted her prehistoric grip along a wooden dowel, edging away from him. She cocked her head. She was dripping with character. When the air traffic controller started to bob in place, Rita bobbed in place as well. "Get down," he whispered. "Show me what you got." Farther into the cage, he piloted his fist. She stopped bobbing and issued a low-pitched rumbling noise akin to human gargling. "Whoa." Shoulders hunched, he listened for stirrings in the house. Nothing. Rita leaned forward, then crept back, teasing him. He slipped his cell phone from his jeans. The night before, he'd been videotaping Rita through the bars of her cage when the owner appeared. Even at work, he had a lot of time on his hands, in between brief shifts. He managed a huge portion of Caribbean airspace. Millions benefited, people he could only envision in dreams, each at the center of a circle, the overlapping edges bluish green. He called up the video of Rita and faced the phone toward her like a mirror she might peer into. Perched at the threshold of the cage, she need only lean forward to stroke the smooth surface of the phone with her calcified carapace of a beak. She seemed bored. The video ended. The air traffic controller wiped the phone on his jeans, put it away, and offered Rita his wrist. "Do you recall?" he said. She angled an eye at him, at his wrist, then inched onto the bump of it, her talons needling his skin. "I'm not cruel, Rita," he said. "I'm patient." Rita seemed to understand. He focused. He tried to sensitize himself to her zone, which he imagined extending a few inches from the center of her being, wherever it was that looked out through her eyes resided. From there, if it existed, it would radiate out beyond her downy outline into the realm of worldly contingencies. But he saw nothing like that. Rita lowered her iridescent head as though inviting him to caress the soft blue-green region above her beak, like a lover. But he was cautious. The owner had done exactly this the night before, even as she'd issued warnings. And when he tried it now, Rita bobbed left, then right, a slow-motion dodge like something from the age of silent film. Years from now, this bird, this very Rita, would remember the air traffic controller. He'd be dead. All the people he'd kept safe would be dead. Not Rita. He offered up the bony fulcrum of his knuckle against which she might scratch herself. He wasn't going to rush her. She could come to him. But she must have grown confused despite her limitless wisdom, because she raised her beak in a swift, thoroughly natural motion, clamped onto the fatty bulge beneath his knuckle, and opened a beak-shaped gash. She hopped to the room's only wingback chair to look back at him. He whistled an insuck, cupped his hand, and turned toward the hallway light. "Damn, girlfriend." There was a triangular flap, a little trapdoor of flesh and pulp like the incurled isosceles he'd punched into cans of high C as a child. There was no pain yet. The blood welled thick and viscous, spilling into his other palm, then over to drip and bead on the oriental rug's elaborate patterns. At first, he had the presence of mind not to move. He resisted the airy panic of two eager pourers of champagne, surprised by the volume of bubbly. He took his finger in his mouth and tongued the wound. It tasted the way licking the nodes of a 9-volt battery felt, tangy. Rita's entire manner suggested a profound lack of concern. Her own tongue appeared for a moment. Her own dry tongue appeared for a moment. With it, she seemed to lick her lips. But parrots didn't have lips. They had beaks. Hers was limbed with red. Stiffly, the air traffic controller stepped into the lavatory off the parlor and with his elbow tripped the light switch. He stood over an antique porcelain sink all spotted with brownish cracks and watched it spot with red. With the meat of his good hand, he twisted the cold water on and let the clean stream rinse the blood from his fingers in curled strings. He pulled a hand towel from a silver loop and fashioned a bandage that wound around and around to end in a fat cotton mitt that he held up for inspection. He felt calm, but this didn't surprise him. Whatever his own circle touched, even for a moment, it left calmer, more itself. In the parlor, Rita clung to the converging bars at the crown of her cage. She scratched her head with her free claw. She lifted a wing to dislodge parasites with her enormous beak. The air traffic controller listened again for stirring in the house. He unraveled the bandage and the gore surged again like fresh jewelry. He found a clean towel and tightly rewrapped the wounded finger. I see what you mean, Rita, he said to himself. I hear you. Back in the parlor, he watched the bird maneuver with the steadying grip of her beak into the cage. What did the taste of human flesh do to a parrot? Enough said. He snapped the door shut, lifted the cage from its hook, set it on the rug to drape the knit cover. With his good hand, his boots avoiding the blood splatter on the rug, he carried the cage out onto the hallway's polished hardwood, down the stairs, then into the wider space of what the owner called the common area. The wound in his finger seemed fully awake now. It seemed to be transmitting in a code he'd forgotten along telegraph wires that loped to the furthest outposts of what he was. Near the threshold to the den, he felt a ripple, a fluctuation he associated with the intersection of zones. There he saw, slumped on the couch, the owner's son, whose overcoat had ridden up to his waist, whose chin rested in a pool of his own neck flesh. Which one you got there, champ? A puffy man. He didn't take up a lot of space. He was younger than the air traffic controller by 15 years. They looked like contemporaries. The air traffic controller raised the cage and cleared his throat. Rita, I think. You mean Kiwi. The owner's son sat up. No, it's Rita. I don't know where you come up with Rita. There's Kiwi and Wink. He reached for a square, unlabeled bottle on a side table. His wet eyes on the air traffic controller, he drew a slow, significant draft. She nip you? The air traffic controller lifted the mid of his fist. Sweet Jesus. The owner's son stood, approached, slowed, smiled. Did you stop off on the way home? There was mockery in his voice. We haven't been formally introduced. Where are you taking my bird? The man seemed to remember the bottle in his hand. He offered it to the air traffic controller, whose own hands were full. Then he crouched carefully to lift the cover. You got Kiwi here. She's not partial to this cover. Too hot. Not enough air gets in. She don't like it. That's your bird. The air traffic controller tried to smile. They're both my birds. Our birds. Me and my mother's. You have something with Rita, a certain special something between you. Let's get some air. A rapport. He thought he could see it now, the uneven frontier of the man's zone, shifting, glimmering. The owner's son stood blinking at him. Put the cage down. I wouldn't hurt Rita. It's Kiwi. Put the cage down. The air traffic controller glanced at his bandaged hand, thinking he might see his wounded finger charged and burning through the fabric of the towel, its own species of light leaking out. I apologize. I left a little blood on the rug up there. Up where? In the parlor, on the rug. You've had a few. You stopped off. Neither of them had noticed the owner. Now it was too late. She stood in the hall in a tartan robe, her hair up, her arms crossed, her thin white shins below. Oop, said her son. She looked from one man to the other and back. What'd I tell you? She said finally to the air traffic controller. There was power in her eyes. You stuck your finger in the cage. Not the whole story, but the air traffic controller wasn't going to get into it all, the complicated world. I did, he said. How bad she get you? She asked. A granny and a looker all in one, a sear into his uncluttered soul. Then, where are you taking my bird? The owner's son fussed with a boxy lump in his t-shirt pocket. Him and I were going out for a smoke. But the owner continued to glare at the air traffic controller, even after he'd set the cage down between them. Her eyes were unbearable. People were dying on the other side of the world, he wanted to say. Flickering out, failing. Here we were bickering over birds in Florida. So be it, he wanted to say. Lesson learned. He'd never touch another parrot in his life. Decades hence, in homes not yet built by people not yet born, Reader would grow strong on the memory of his blood. He'd live on in that way. The owner stepped forward. The air traffic controller edged back, as though to stay just outside her zone of significance. But her zone of significance was as undeniable as it was vast. And by now he knew its edges extended well beyond the X-ray frame of the great house. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Hold on, let me get Philip back up here. Let's give you some applause that you can hear.
Nice. Appreciate that.
Such like haunting and vivid imagery as usual, as I remember from your other readings and stories. Thank you so much for sharing. I absolutely loved what you shared about St. Francis of Assisi at the beginning too, getting into this. What was it? And he had an uncomplicated rapport with birds. I love it.
Feeds them, you know.
Yeah.
There's always one on a statue, you know, like the statue.
Just there, you know, he's just, you know, perfectly floating around with them, like walking around. I have a picture of him over here, and yeah, he's covered in birds.
He's my favorite saint.
Yes, you know, I think he might be mine too.
Everybody loves him, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. I think so. All right. Well, Pete, such a great reading. Of course, just like Anton, you'll have to go on Facebook and YouTube later and just see all of the love that you received. Now, since, you know, there is something that we didn't get to share at the beginning of our stream tonight, because Chris himself popped in and joined us, but he actually sent in a little.
Anton?
Was that Anton? Oh, we're going to bring him up. We're going to bring him up. But I think since we have a few minutes, don't worry, Philip. You know what, Anton, we'll bring you up for this too. we are about to start our Q&A, but since we have a few extra minutes before 9, Chris sent in a little video for us. So I would love to share that video while our audience is sending in their questions for Anton Yakovlev and also Pete Duval. Woo! All right, so please send in your questions. We are going to share, while you're sending in your questions, a video sent in from Chris. He is playing the song that he will play in his cameo in the movie version of Shriver. So he's going to share it with us. If you have read Shriver, you'll get some of the references. Even if you haven't read Shriver yet, it's still a delightful little performance by Chris, and that'll give you time, like I said, to share your questions and just give us a little musical interlude. So here we go.
Hey, Katie. Hey, Philip. Hope you guys are having fun. I really miss being here with you guys. But as you know, I am in Los Angeles, California. And just as a little treat, I thought I would play for you the song that I'm going to be performing in the film version of Shriver. It is called The Ballad of Shriver. It goes like this. Shriver, is he dead or alive, or is he underground somewhere, writing a novel? Oh, Mr. Shriver, is he really alive, sir, or just a pseudonym for someone else with bigger plans than being just a man named Shriver? When I read Goat Time, oh so many times, I think that novel really messed with my mind. If I could find the author, I would ask him oh so many things. I worship at his altar, but hesitate to give him angel wings. Not till I find Shriver. Are you dead or alive, or are you underground somewhere, writing a novel? Oh, Mr. Shriver, are you really alive, sir, or just a pseudonym for someone else who just pretends to be a man named Shriver?
I love the neck harmonica.
Anyway, I'll let you get back to it and have fun. I'll talk to you on the other side. Ciao.
All right. Hold on, let me unmute you guys. Yeah.
That was great.
That was so fun. So Chris sent that in. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to join us for a little bit. So, but that was a fun little treat. All right. So here we are in our Q&A time with Pete Duval and Anton Yakovlev. Please continue to send in your questions. I know Phil and I have lots of questions, and I can already see we have a few coming in, so that's perfect. Usually we like to get started by asking how you've been doing so far this last year. During the pandemic, how has it been? Pete, I know that you usually teach. Anton, I know that you usually are out giving readings, down in the city. How has it been this past year with writing and doing what you usually do? Has it changed much? And have there been any silver linings? I guess Anton and then Pete.
Well, I guess doing things like this is a silver lining. Another silver lining, the fact that I'm still employed and have not lost my job like some of my colleagues unfortunately have. I mean, it's isolating, of course, but after a while you get used to it. I mean, at least I do. So it's kind of like I'm feeling calmer about things, comparatively speaking.
Right.
Even, of course, there are always anxiety and challenges of all.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely, Anton. I think thank goodness you've been able to keep your job, and over time it has gotten less less scary, and then hopefully we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel with vaccinations, and hopefully more things getting back to normal. What about you, Pete?
It's I've been teaching online, and so I was thinking about this. Teaching is usually you get jazzed, when you teach. It's invigorating. It's kind of invigorating, right? But teaching online, you just don't. It's just exhausting. Like there's no invigoration from it. But other than that, yeah, I don't. I've been having a lot of trouble concentrating. I don't know, just like it's kind of a weird thing. Like you think that all this extra time, I guess, inside would kind of translate into getting more work done, but it doesn't. It's so I force myself to go out every day and walk in the morning. I take my camera with me, and it really helps. It helps. I look forward to it. I'm going to walk down Jersey City. Jersey City. I can't wait to get to Journal Square. It's insane, but it's actually kind of a joyful thing to do every day. And I can come back and sort of get some work done, but yeah, I don't know. It's like short little things I can do, but it's like a long term. I got to start writing a novel because I got a we call it a sabbatical starting in the fall. So I got to start writing this novel, and I got to start thinking about how I'm gonna because I like to usually I like to write in different places. I go to a coffee shop or whatever. Can't do that.
I miss that.
Yeah, I miss it a lot. So it's kind of I don't know what it's going to be like to try to work on something like extensive, and I have to submerge myself into for long periods. I mean, I've usually in the past I've just become like super obsessed, right? I'm already on the edge of like mental, illness as is. So I don't know how that's gonna.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just and I guess everyone's kind of hitting the wall at the same time or something. That's what I've been reading.
Yep. You know what, Pete? In that way, I can really relate. I feel like in these last few weeks, maybe because we're really seeing that light at the end of the tunnel with vaccinations and maybe things opening up, that the stir craziness is like at maximum capacity, and that same misconception that you said. I mean, maybe I think some people are able to work really well in isolation with a lot of downtime and quiet time and online. But like you just said, there's almost this expectation like, oh, you have more time to write and be more productive. But you're like, but I'm exhausted. It's not the same because I don't have the same rhythm to my life. And
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
I got a question for Pete.
Sure.
You say you do photography, Pete?
Yeah.
So would taking pictures at different places and watching the progress to normalcy help?
Yeah. So what? It's always been like a practice, almost like a kind of meditative practice in a way. Maybe to just try something to get out and not doing the writing, not doing the teaching, do something that just brings me out of, like I just become all eyes, and I was actually there have been quite a few of my friends that I communicate on Facebook who are photographers who have done sort of like studies, like in their own like sort of diaries, photographic diaries on their time in isolation. So in some ways it's weird because in some ways I don't know what kind of personality sort of benefits more from something like this, but there are people definitely who get a lot done, and I think I see these photographer friends that I have on connections that I have who seem to be doing a lot.
Right.
But yeah, I just walk around. I mean, I walk like 5 miles a day. I just bring my camera. I can't go without my camera. It doesn't make any sense.
I could definitely imagine how that, getting out there and doing that would take you outside of that mindset and be that change of pace, be that refreshment that you need.
Yeah, it's very refreshing.
We have a question from Sarah Sleeper for Anton. So Sarah Sleeper says, being published in the New Yorker is a dream for many writers. She asks, how did that come about and how did you feel about it, Anton?
Well, I felt obviously happy and honored and delighted, and it was a big event, obviously. How did it come about? I mean, nothing special, just, submitting,
Amazing. I think it's that's so true. Just submitting, just putting it out there, and give it a try. Send it in, Sarah Sleeper. See, give it a try. I love that. I love that. Anton, I loved in your poems how, especially the ones that were talking about. After a breakup, these mental states and all of these metaphors of thinking and feeling in relation to that that person that the speaker was once so close to. Those were so incredible. And if you go back in our chat to to the moments when you were reading that, people were just totally enthralled. And when you were writing this this poem or these series of poems, and also just in general as you're writing, you have these incredible images and metaphors that just seem to kind of flow just perfectly from one to the next, and it kind of almost like a magical kind of way. What is your process for writing and also for editing to kind of create but also preserve that that incredible flow of these images and metaphors in such a powerful way? Like, I know that's like part craft but also part kind of the spirit moving, so can you describe a little bit about how that works for you? I don't know if that made sense.
Well, at the risk of saying platitude, I think a lot of it just has to do with like trusting my inner subconscious and trusting my inner voice and the associations that if I'm thinking about something kind of like intensely and like in a certain mood, in a certain zone where associations come to me, which is not most of the time, but there's a few times when it does happen, when I'm actually able to write something. Sometimes it just kind of follow. It's not really a stream of consciousness because it kind of makes sense narratively, but I sort of trust that the next metaphor or the leap to the next subject that seems to be a little out of the blue is not completely out of the blue, and that I'm just going to go with it and see where it takes me. And then eventually, I just edit things and find connections that seem to be kind of like weird in my mind. Like, why did I just think of that? And then as I kind of like look over what I've written, I sort of start to discover why, what the connections are, and kind of making it more clear and more obviously connected. And also, maybe cutting out a lot of things. But getting to a certain, So a lot of the time it's just like giving myself permission to actually write down the next crazy thing that came to my mind, even if it sounds like a little off and out of that.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I felt that sort of sense, that intuitive flow of associations, and it was so just perfect. And I can relate to being in that mode when I write, and it's not necessarily one that you can force yourself into or get into very, very easily. But when you're there, you're like, oh, this is, this is happening. And I like what you said about giving yourself permission to like say this or go there, or let the association go there, because you risk bruising that flow if you're kind of trying to edit too much as you write, or maybe control it too much. Yes, I love that. And I really feel that in your poems. Really so awesome. There is a question for Pete, I believe from Dare. Just need to scroll up a little bit. No, it's from Sarah Sleeper. I'm so sorry. Correction. Sarah Sleeper asks Pete, where can we see Pete's photography? I see it on Instagram. Where else is it?
I have a Tumblr account, but I don't update it as much. I kind of prefer Tumblr. Instagram, oddly, is not really a good place to show photographs. It's a strange, you can't make it bigger. It's like a little small.
Right. because it's like 4 photographs, but it's not it's not compatible with anything that you're doing.
Forces you into a square format, or I used to do that. But I can tweet the. I can. I guess I can. Can I put it in the comments section? It's just DuvalPete.tumblr.com, just like my name first. Duval Pete, yeah.
Duval Pete at Tumblr.
For a while, but the one on Instagram is just it's oddly Cormac Blue, CORMACBLUE. Not really sure. I don't remember how I chose that, but
I like it.
And my favorite color.
I like it. I like it. I have 2 questions. I have 2 questions for you, Pete. I want to make sure I don't forget either one of them before I ask. My first one is that you're about to write a novel, but you have 2 short story collections. And in my mind, whenever I think of Pete Duval, I think of these kind of like haunting short stories. What draws you to the short story, and what I say? I want to ask almost like, do you love this format? What do you love about about short stories?
I think short fiction, especially really short stuff like the one I just read, is probably 2,500 words. It's actually weirdly closer to poetry, I think, than it is to the novel, right? So it's like it's got something to do with the intensity of the prose, or the sort of like rich you're trying to get to a kind of like rich referential specificity or something that you get that in a novel, but it doesn't. The novel doesn't rely on it as much, it seems to me. But I like what Anton was saying about the process of kind of just going with something that seems ridiculous, or something that seems absurd, and because it seems to me like that's much more, the short story is much more amenable to that process, because because it relies so much on just subtle imagery and stuff like that. The novel is much more like it's like scaffolding. It's like setting up these. I kind of prefer the short story to the novel. I mean, some of my favorite things are novels, but for me, like my best like moments reading have been, always, for some reason, it just always seemed to be the short story, because it's like, I don't know, it's like endings, right? The ending of a short story is always like, I can think of reading for the first time some of my favorite short stories and just being kind of like blown away. Getting to the end of a novel is a little different. Like, it's kind of a accumulation, whereas a short story, it's like a punch in the face. Right?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
That's so cool. You know what, Philip, I want you to pop in here, because we're talking about flow, and how as we're writing, kind of allowing ourselves to giving ourselves like permission to kind of write what's kind of next on our mind, almost intuitively, to kind of maintain that emotional power of what we're trying to express. How would you describe that in your process? Because you have incredibly powerful performance poems, very rhythmic work. Like, is it something you can put your finger on, Philip?
I think one of the things that I do, I'll write a piece, and then when I finish the piece, I pretty much rewrite it for performance. And then that way, I'm taking out all the filler words, all the words that someone's going to say in their head. I'm taking those out.
Right.
And I may add some words as well, so that flow, it just boom. Keeps going like that.
Yeah. I love that. That's almost a little bit of a reverse, like almost like the first time you're writing it, you're making almost like detailed notes, and then you're going back to it and finding that flow and making it happen. That's awesome. I love it.
Another crazy thing that I do is when I'm practicing, I practice as if I'm speaking to a child, a teenager, someone my age, just so I could get that rhythm going.
Yeah, that's great. That is so cool. Thank you so much, Philip. I had an additional question for Pete, but I'm blanking on it right now.
Uh-oh. I got a question for Anton, so you can you can think about it before I blank out. We don't want everybody blank out on the screen like, who's next?
No, I had a second one. I'll remember it. But yes, please, Philip, ask Anton.
So Anton, here's my question. At times, Russian could be a harsh language at times, correct?
What do you mean harsh?
I mean the words. It comes across like you're saying something different than what you're really trying to portray.
So maybe like to an English speaking ear, there are harder sounds sometimes. So I think to rephrase, and maybe to ask to maybe add a question that I want to ask in with this question. When you're sharing a poem in Russian, and in your translation, how can you kind of preserve the tone and the sound in a completely different language, because each language sort of has its own sort of tone and character to it. How does that figure into the translation process and when you're reading it?
Yeah, so I guess two questions here. To answer the first question, to me it doesn't sound harsh, but I grew up with it, so I'm used to it. When I speak English in regular conversation, people tell me all the time that I sound severe, but I'm not a severe person. I'm a pretty friendly person, But that's just the problem that I have. And I think probably the way that I say words, the way I pronounce things doesn't help me with that. How do I transit? I think what I do when it's really kind of flowing and when I'm really enjoying the process, what I'm doing is I kind of live with the poem in Russian, like with the Russian poem. I kind of like keep saying it to myself, kind of like keep the music of it sort of playing in my head. And eventually, some kind of a rhythm that seems to be somewhat matching kind of emerges. And I almost seem to be able to just kind of like write down the translation that obviously, means the same thing, but subconsciously there is also like some kind of a rhythmical correspondence, some sort of a similar flow. Right. That is not exactly as you've noticed. I didn't translate Yesenian syllable in a syllabotonic in a strict pentameter or whatever rhyme and meter way, but I did try to sort of match the overall flow of the poems. Right. Nevertheless, and a lot of the time when I like one of the things that's kind of interesting is like sometimes I read a bunch of Russian poems, right, and I actually become inspired to write something, and I write in English. Like I only write in English these days. I used to write in Russian, but for some reason, like even like listening or reading Russian poetry frequently puts me in the mood of writing something of my own, even though the language is the whole thing. So nice. It's just kind of getting into that rhythm, getting into that flow in my head. Nice. I could totally relate to that. That it is so cool. And actually, Philip commented during your reading about just your reading style and flow, with just, of course, these beautiful and poignant images in your poems. So vividly in my mind. I was so captivated, but also your reading style and the way that you interacted with the audience in such a powerful way, but also in such a gentle way. It was so beautifully presented.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we don't think about that as, as much as we should. When we read our work, how are we, presenting that, and how are we sharing that? How does that affect the way it's feeling, how it's landing with people? And it definitely connected. It definitely connected, Anton. I thought of I thought of another question for you, Anton, and I re-forgot my question for Pete. It came back to me and it left me. And Pete, I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back. But I wanted to ask, and you know what? I think Philip can chime in with this too. Anton, I'm so used to seeing you in normal times having readings out at different places, at the Bowery, at Carmine Street Metrics, in New Jersey as well. How has it been maybe embracing online readings, or just like not being able to be out in person? Philip is like, I can't wait to be back on a stage, but we're so glad that we met him during this time. How has it been in that respect, Anton? Are you going crazy like Pete?
Sometimes it's been a bit of a mixed bag, because simultaneously I feel like there are, it's very convenient to just be able to tune in and maybe, have a reading. Like sometimes we do at Carmine Street Metrics, where we have somebody from, Tasmania and Sweden and Greece and California and Oregon at the same time, all on the same Zoom reading. So in some ways, it's like like I was talking about silver linings, being one of them. So it's wonderful in that sense. And part of me kind of like wishes that these don't go away entirely.
Right, I agree about this. Yes.
Pandemic. The challenge for me is that I work on the computer all the time. I from 9 to 5 or 6, whatever, I'm on my computer. I have, video calls with my colleagues all day. And so a lot of the time when it's like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and there are all these exciting readings from Ireland, California, New York, whatever, that I could listen in. A lot of the time I'm actually like, I'm just, my eyes are hurting. So in a way, like I was really relating to what Pete was saying about like walking to Journal Square, because like I've been doing that a lot. I'm in Ridgewood, New Jersey right now, and I've been hiking. I've been going to Harriman State Park sometimes like 3 or 4 times a week, like right after work. And just because like I want to be, I want to like see something, be in a different physical space, not just be in the same room, basically 23 hours of my life out of 24. I feel like I miss out on some of those readings that I would not have in normal times been able to attend, and now I can. But sometimes I just don't, because it's like
can't be on the computer anymore. I totally get that. When Pete mentioned that before too, I wanted to say I totally get this. Sometimes I get excited. Oh, I'm out of toothpaste. I have another reason to go to Stop and Shop. Like, just see some people, just be somewhere. And Philip, I know you're now we want to keep you on our live stream forever, but we hope to have in-person events at some point when we can. But I know, Philip, you're missing the stage. You have incredible YouTube videos up. You guys got to go check them out. Philip J. Curtis, performing live in a 3D space for an audience, a live audience in the room.
We have time for another question for Anton. I have another question for Anton.
We you know what, we definitely do, but I remembered my question for Pete. Let me just squeeze this in there, but hold your question, Philip. We will get to it. Yes. Phil, I remembered my question. It's a very quick one. When Charles Rafferty was on here, he was reading a lot of flash fiction that he totally blurred the lines between prose poetry and flash fiction, and he kind of, for him, felt that they were sort of, they had become for him one and the same. And you said that writing short stories was really poetic for you. It was like poetry in terms of the flow. Have you ever thought of of going into flash fiction or kind of like treading the edge of prose poetry?
Yeah, I've written some flash fiction, and actually I've taught the Colonel by it's a famous poem by what's her name? I can't think of her name. It's a famous poem. It's a poem, but it's actually written like it's in like a box, like it's like a piece. It's like a column on a.
Oh, cool.
You know what I'm talking about. What's her name?
Oh,
damn! I'm just
oh,
blanking.
I know. I'm not gonna. It's
about
my
she has like a memoir out recently, but I'm losing my mind. So this is I just had it in my top of my tongue.
It's so frustrating. That was like the question I wanted to ask you that came and left twice.
That happens. But no, yeah, I've written some flash fiction, but it seems to me lightning kind of has to strike with something like that, right? Like it's in order for it to be good. Like it can be great. Like when you read a great piece of flash fiction, it's amazing, right? Like it's it has like the power of poetry, and it has like it has like that thing that kind of clocks you in the jaw. But when it's bad, it just seems kind of like it's bad. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's worse than not so great short fiction, right? It's so much as kind of even you think that you have like it's funny. People keep saying things like, "Oh, you'd think with our shortened attention spans, we'd be really into short, to flash fiction." But that's really not how it works, because flash fiction requires so much concentration and so much like intensity as
in such a short space. Yeah.
I mean, as a writer and a reader, right? Like it's so intense. You can't skim, So it seems to me like it's lightning that has to strike. I mean, I think it does in short fiction too. I mean, short stories too. But I occasionally do it, but it's weird. It's kind of like it has to just
it has to just be right.
Different process than writing short fiction. Because like for me, short fiction, I don't know really where I'm going, but I have enough time to find out. Sort of like we have like find it on the way, but in like something that's like like 500 words or whatever it is, there's just not enough time to kind of
every single you need to be on 100% every single word. I get it. Sure. Thanks, Pete. Philip, your question for Anton.
No. I got it. Anton, I got a question for you. Have you ever read something in Russian and in English, dual languages at the same time in a piece? And if you do, where's your concentration at? On the English or the Russian?
You mean have I read something that was written in both languages or
with languages?
Part of it is Russian, part of it is English. Intertwined into two languages.
Have I found literature that does that?
No, that you wrote and presented.
No. Unfortunately, I mean, I've experimented with it, but I never, nothing that seemed to be, really worthwhile. Interestingly, I dream in a combination of the two languages, like almost all the time. Sometimes when I write down, like you have song lyrics or poetry that comes to mind in a dream, and then you wake up and you try to write it down. Almost all the time when I actually write something down, it's a mishmash of English and Russian words, which in one sense makes it unusable or difficult, unless I did want to write macaronic verse, which I just, I haven't really done a lot of it. Maybe I should.
Oh my God, I love this.
But yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess my subconscious is all just jumbled.
I absolutely love that. And even though you would have to translate yourself and explain yourself, I bet you there would be something about the flow that would be understood even to someone who couldn't understand Russian if they had the snips of English in there. I want you to explore this, Anton. I'm like gonna give you give you some homework now. Oh God, that sounds so
next time he's back, right?
Yeah. Yes, Philip. Yes. Okay, Anton, next time. Wow. Oh, I love that way you said, like, I'm gonna wake up from a dream, I try to write it down, and it's in the 2 languages. Ooh. I love this. Okay, so next time we'll be in touch about that. It is 9:30, and so we really have run out of time, but I still want you guys to answer our famous last double question, which is, please share with us a pearl of wisdom for writers, especially emerging writers, and please share a book recommendation, any book recommendation that is really moving you right now. So a pearl of wisdom and a book recommendation. Pete, are you ready to answer those 2 questions?
Let me think. Can I pass and then I'll come
I know it's kind of a big one. Maybe Anton, do you have your answers at the tip of your tongue?
I have half an answer at the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
I guess a book that really moved me deeply recently is Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh.
Okay.
Which I think is, it's a very kind of experimental, almost sort of like a mystery story in which we know from the first page that it's not really going to be about solving a mystery. Wow. And yet we follow it because the writing is so engrossing and fascinating.
Nice.
And eventually you realize, sort of like, you think it's about one thing, which is not what it pretends to be about, and then it turns out to be about something even different. And really,
nice.
It starts out, you think it's a murder mystery. It pretends to be a murder mystery. It's really a portrait of a person, but ultimately it's about the power of art and the failures of art. So there's all these layers. And, what's fascinating is that eventually we do find out what happened. And it is by that time, the mindset of the character and the reader has gone so far in the other direction.
Right. You're not even expecting.
Oh, yeah, of course, sure. Yeah, moving on.
Nice.
And it's quite heartbreaking, but in a really inspiring way.
I like that. I think I can imagine what you mean. It sounds like an incredible book. And a pearl of wisdom, Anton?
A pearl of wisdom. I don't have any wisdom. I'm not very wise.
You already shared a lot with us.
Let's see. Don't be afraid to learn from your own mistakes.
Yes.
Don't always feel like you need to learn from others' mistakes, because sometimes you have to write stupid things and go through the mistakes that you've seen other make. But until you've made the same, sometimes you actually have to make them yourself.
You have to.
for you to really process it and maybe move on, or, learn from it for them.
I love that piece of advice, that pearl of wisdom. Thank you so much, Anton. Pete, are you ready?
Let's see. Yeah, I like this idea of so I think most of the work that gets done, most of the important stuff that gets into a book or when you're writing or a short story comes from the unconscious. We kind of like talked about that. Anton mentioned it earlier, and I've kind of been thinking about that a lot in the last year, and how, like, the thing, I think the pearl of wisdom would be that you should try to write every day. You don't have to do a lot, just touch it every day, because you get that thing that, whatever you want to call it, the unconscious gets, I think it comes to the surface quicker.
Yeah.
You do it every day because it takes time to get into it. But if you've already been doing it, and Graham Greene said that he used to write like 500 words a day, I guess. But he would stop, like he would literally write 500 words, and even if he was in the middle of a sentence, he would stop.
Yeah.
single day. And if you just do the math on like if you did that for a year, you'd have an enormous amount of material. So
Yeah.
it's not like you have to. I think a lot of people feel like they have to wait till they've got like this big chunk of time to do work. But I don't. I think a lot of writers don't do that. Like a lot of writers do for discipline and stuff. But I think it can be a difficult discipline. Like you don't have to spend hours, writing. It's good if you can, but I think that's the main thing. But it's that thing about most of the work that gets done in if you write a great piece is not it's not like cognitive. It's not like making it happen. You're just you're keeping the story. Like I always think of this, like when I write a story, I try to keep it outer. Like I just watch it go, and then I wait. The stuff is, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen not because I'm like, oh, there it is,
Right.
It's going to happen when I'm not thinking about it. Which is, I think people that aren't writers, they don't get that. They think, you're like this, you just, how can you think
word machine.
All that stuff in there? And I can't speak for other writers necessarily, but most of the friends that I have that are writers, I know they're not like doing that, like it's not, it's happening to them. Right.
Yeah.
But my book, I was just thinking about this book, about walking, right? It's called In Praise of Walking. It's a book by Shane O'Mara, and it's this really interesting book about like the cognitive and physiological benefits of walking. It's really weird because apparently the premise is that, and it makes sense, right? That human beings they walk, that's one of the things that sort of sets them apart from other animals. They can walk a long way, and a lot of my favorite writers and filmmakers like Werner Herzog talks about this all the time, that walking is it's amazing. It does something. It's kind of hard. They're just starting to figure out like why it affects like people that are creative. Like it helps your creativity. And they don't really know all the mechanisms yet, but it has something to do with like walking along at 3 miles an hour. Your brain is running at like peak. It's all kinds of stuff.
Whoa.
Yeah, you should check it out. It's called In Praise of Walking.
Nice.
I have other books about walking, but this one is really good, and it's like the guy's like a genius. He's bringing together like natural history and stuff like that. But I
love this.
But it's like the thing that's cool about it is like you don't have to like the benefits are they're not. You don't have to do anaerobic exercise to get these benefits. Matter of fact, it's better.
Just move.
Just walk. Yeah, and if you have someone to walk with and talk with, that's even better. But you can it's just by walking.
I love that, and that kind of sounds like what has been sort of your salvation this past year is getting out there and walking, and that really makes sense. Pete, that's so cool. I'll have to definitely check this out, and of course the book that you mentioned too, Anton, sounds incredible.
What's that book that Anton mentioned again?
Death in Her Hands.
Death in Her Hands.
By Odessa Moshfegh.
Nice.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are a little bit over time, but it was totally worth it for those incredible pearls of wisdom and recommendations. I just want to thank you again, Anton Yakovlev and Pete Duval, for your readings tonight and for spending your evening with us.
Thank you.
Your questions.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to
Nice
thank.
to meet you, Phil.
Likewise.
Nice to meet you, Anton.
Yeah. And I also need to thank my amazing special guest co-host, Philip J. Curtis. Yes. Chances in the comments roasting you again, Philip.
I'll have to go back.
You'll have to go back and get him. But it's been another fabulous night, another fabulous reading. Thanks so much to our readers, to our audience, to Philip, also to Chris out there in California. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you back here
next week.
What's that?
Who's on next week?
Oh, we need to say who's on next week. We have playwright.
I did my job.
You did. Yes. Thank you, Philip. Thank you. We have on Matt Garland, who is a playwright. We will have a play, a segment of a play for you. Very exciting. And we'll also have Dare Fuller Delano with us from our program, our friend who is in the audience tonight. It's going to be another incredible night, so don't miss it next Sunday at 8. Thank you, Philip. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night.